So last week we did the seed sowing pipeline, and today we're going to do the seedling pipeline. So basically from germination through to planting out, but not including planting out. I've got a few examples here and another one here. So these are the seedlings that I sowed last week. So these are all the Asian greens. These are ready for pricking out now, of course. And I'll talk about the pricking out and do a bit of it in a minute. And then we've got the radish and the turnips, and a good example of why I generally don't do two types of seed in the same tray, because they grow at quite different rates. So these turnips probably won't be ready to plant out for a couple of weeks. These will be ready in a week, these radish. Then we've got the spinach. So that's quite a nice tray of spinach, but that is 3 weeks old now. And I'd normally like to plant that out at 3 weeks, but it's not ready. That's because it's been growing in the greenhouse, where it's just not been quite warm enough at night to keep the growth going. And so they're running about a week late. And then we've got the peppers, late peppers. And so I pricked those out last week, and they only had their seed leaves, and now they've got their first true leaves. So these are the seed leaves. These are the first true leaves. And yeah, they're all looking really quite nice. I'm quite happy with those. And we'll talk about the ideal growing conditions for all the different types of seedlings and things that we've got in here, or what I consider to be the ideal growing conditions and timings as well. So let's just change this over, and we'll get on with some pricking out. So when I'm pricking out, I swap over from seed starting compost to multi-purpose compost. And multi-purpose is about £5 a bag. I think it's a big bag as well, 60 litres I think. And that, £5 a bag, that's a lot cheaper than seed starting compost, which the stuff I use is probably about £20 a bag off Amazon. And yeah, really expensive. That's for 75 litres. But this multi-purpose is just fine for pricking out into. So that's how we get started. I'll just swap over to this tray, because I've already dipped all the holes. So the way I like to do it, as I use a bradawl, doesn't really matter what you use, you just kind of lift this up, loosen these off, so that you can get the roots out without damaging them. And then we take our label and we say, I'm going to do, I don't know, say 3 rows of Komatsuma. Grab the leaf, loosen it off. I actually don't mind putting multiple seedlings in here. I don't mind if I just get one. What I'm looking for is basically to plant them right up to the seed leaf. Now, it's not always easy to do that. Sometimes they're a bit too long. You can kind of just push them in like that. And seems a bit brutal, but it works just fine. At least it does with brassicas. I don't generally have the problem with others, but you can see quite long, quite leggy. And this is the beauty, I think, of pricking out. What you're doing here is you're taking something that's pretty suboptimal, that long, horrible, weak, leggy stem. Look how long that one is there. I mean, it's absolutely useless. But kind of bend it over there, pop it in, and it'll grow just fine. So I'm going to carry on doing this. So I'm going to give these a good water, because these are going in the greenhouse. It's pretty sunny at the moment. I actually would normally just leave these in the shade somewhere to settle in, but it's getting late in the afternoon now, and so they're actually going to be enjoying night time in here basically. It's pretty soon, so I'm just going to leave them in here, and they're going to be fine in here. Ideally, you want to keep it frost free, in the greenhouse at this time of year, because you've got a lot of things in here that don't want a lot of repeated frosts on them. So things like celery, onions, Asian greens, you know, even little brassica seedling, other brassica seedlings like kale, cabbage, cauliflowers and things like that. Ideally they don't really want repeated frosts. They can cope, they'll live through a frost pretty successfully, but living through something and kind of thriving on it are something different altogether. And obviously it's still way too cold at night for Asian greens, not for Asian greens, for tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers and all of that sort of thing, no matter what you do really, unless you're heating, and I'm not heating. I do try and make a distinction actually between heating and keeping it frost free. So yeah, heating for me means 10 degrees, 11 degrees, something like that, which basically is warm enough for pretty much anything once it's germinated. And frost free, which is kind of basically what you need if you've got potatoes in here and you've got strawberries in flower like I have, and say you've got celery and onions and all of that sort of thing. So let's go through the different seedlings. We'll just look at how things are going. So first up, I think I'll just go round basically and show you what's happening. So we've got the apricots here, and obviously they're in flower. So I've got my little paintbrush here. I have been going round every morning just pollinating those. I've got quite a lot of strawberries in flower as well, so basically the same with those. These are the peppers. These are the early peppers, the ones that are going to grow on in this greenhouse, and I've got them in here during the day. It's lovely and warm in here during the day at the moment, and it's giving them a bit more airflow than they would get inside, and of course it's saving me money on grow lights, and they're looking pretty good. They're nice stocky plants, and yeah, so they'll be coming in here permanently in April. So I'm kind of getting them used to these conditions, and yeah, they're liking it at the moment. But at night time, so basically when the sun sort of sets behind that house over there, which is probably about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they're going back inside the house, back under grow lights for a couple of hours, and they're getting a couple of hours under grow lights in the morning as well before they come in here, because it's not really warm enough for them until about 10 o'clock. So that's the peppers. They're getting, I think, about 14 hours of light at the moment, which is about right for the stage of development that they're in. And of course they've got certain little buds on here, and a few of them are in flower. I generally leave 1 or 2 flowers on here, and then I pinch them off after a week or so, just because flowers are just a fantastic way of spotting greenfly. You know, it's quite hard sometimes to spot greenfly on the leaves, but the greenfly absolutely love the flowers, and of course that contrast of green on white makes it really easy to spot. These are the early tomatoes. Again, they're really loving it in here during the day, but they're inside under grow lights as well for an extra sort of 4 hours a day, and they're coming on quite nicely as well. And these are just the ones that are going to go in hanging baskets in April in here, and the hanging baskets going up here, sort of down the centre here, because it's got all the strawberries and things as well. And as I say, still way too cold in here overnight for tomatoes. It needs to be about 10 degrees, and obviously it's definitely 10 degrees in the house at night. So they're going okay. The early celeries are doing well. Celery again, at this sort of stage it can cope with a bit of a frost, but you don't want any repeated frosts on it. That's going to increase the likelihood that it's going to go to seed. Potatoes, got to keep those frost free, but they actually don't mind cool temperatures, but they grow really well in warm temperatures. You know, if you think about your potatoes, you know, they really grow well in late spring and all through summer, and so they're loving the heat in here at the moment. And obviously, as I say, I'm keeping these frost free. You could keep them frost free without any heat, just with a bit of fleece, But because I've got so many different things in here that need to be kept frost-free, I am using heat, and it cost me £1 all the way through February to keep this greenhouse frost-free. So yeah, it's not a big cost. I've got my next batch of potatoes here in these little pots, ready to be potted on pretty soon. And I've got my next batch here, and pretty soon I won't bother with using these little pots. I'll just go straight into the big pots. Leeks are coming on quite nicely. Pricked those out last week, and they've all perked up really well. They're all standing quite tall, so I'm quite happy with those. And then we've got the brassicas, my early crop of brassicas. So I've got my early colettes, my early cauliflowers, my early cabbages, red cabbages, and Savoy cabbages, and they're all looking quite nice, and they are 5 weeks old. So they're doing pretty well in here. They'll be potted on before they go out. They're going to go out in May, early May, maybe about the 10th of May, something like that. And yeah, they're looking right on target for that. As I say, they'll get potted on into one of these pots in probably about 3 weeks' time, something like that. And then we've got the spinach that I showed you earlier, and that's going to get planted out in about a week's time. And of course I've got earlier successions of all these things. I mean, I've got cauliflowers that are this big, calabrese, you know, that's this big, spinach, obviously loads of spinach in production and things like that. Loads of strawberries, all in flower, the strawberries. The peas are doing nicely. More of the early peppers. And then we've got the peas. These are looking pretty good. I'm just about to plant these out. So these are 5 weeks old. So if they'd not been in the greenhouse and they'd been under grow lights, they'd be ready in 3 weeks. But in the greenhouse, because of those cold nights, yeah, they're just a little bit behind. But I'm quite happy because it's I didn't really need them any earlier. These are just peas for shoots. So all the peas for eating pods are all in the ground, have been for ages. And then I've got, as I said, all of my onions, salad onions, and all that up on the shelf. And all of those cope with a frost, but as I say, they're all better kept frost-free, really. And then out here on the patio, we've got my little hardening off area, and yeah, lots of nice little brassicas that I'm actually going to be planting out this week. So I think that is pretty much it for my seedling pipeline.